Back, everybody, to another edition here of the Auburn Undercover Podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Hello to everybody who is joining in on our YouTube live stream and wherever else you're watching this here on Thursday evening. Joined here today by Christian Clemente and Jason Caldwell to talk about a lot of stuff. It's been busy this week. The transfer portal continues to be obviously a big storyline for both football and basketball. What time is it right now? The Hoops transfer portal is about to close here in a couple hours at 11 o'clock.
8:30 right now, 8:35 local time.
Okay, so there's a little bit of time left for some breaking news here at the end, but obviously it's probably not going to be the case. So that'll be closed up for non-graduate transfers. The football portal has obviously been closed for a little bit now, but that news continues to flow in. For Auburn, they got a couple transfer additions, I think, since we last spoke here on the podcast. But so we'll leave it open if anybody's watching. You know, we talked about this in the on the message board. But if anybody has any questions or anything like that, you want to pop into the comments, we can sort of get to those as we go along, since we're just kind of be free flow in this thing. But we'll touch on here a couple, here at the start. The Auburn teams that are actually playing right now in the postseason for Auburn softball, and then Auburn baseball is sort of winding things down. We were going to talk about this earlier in the week. Jason, of course, Auburn baseball is coming off of a couple really big series wins against the number 2 and the number 1 teams in the country. As we speak right now here on Thursday, they didn't play tonight because of a rain delay, but going up against Ole Miss in Oxford this weekend, and it certainly seems like they're picking up steam at the right time in the season.
Yeah, no, it did not play Thursday night. It's supposed to play a Thursday night, a national TV game on ESPNU. Lots of rain came through Oxford, and so they called a little early. Doubleheader Friday, first game at 2:00, second game an hour after that one to follow. So this Auburn team's used to playing doubleheaders. They played quite a few this year. So for them, it's just kind of another bump in the road. They've actually left Auburn early Tuesday, scheduled to play Sanford at the Hoover Met Tuesday night. That got rained out, and so they were going to play Tuesday night, just go head on to Oxford, practice, do all those things. So they've actually will have gone from Auburn on Tuesday morning to now not playing until Friday. So a little bit of a strange kind of schedule quirk for them now because of the rain out, but it actually sets pitching back up to where it was with Tommy Vale. Has been a Friday guy. He bumped to Saturday last week, but now you'll have Chase also back to Friday night where he was last week. Tommy Vale will pitch on Friday, and Christian Herbert holds on Saturday. So you're still going to finish because you'll have Thursday, Friday, Saturday next week, and then a couple more wins at least get you in the SEC tournament, and probably playing early midweek then. So you'll have to move some things around. So it's just part of what you deal with this time of year with baseball and softball. And so for this team, it's kind of go out and keep doing it. Go try to win a couple more games on the road in Oxford, Mississippi.
What has been working for them so well, Jason, in these couple series against, like we talked about, 2 of the best teams in the country?
Yeah, offense has been there. I mean, they hit a bunch of home runs at South Carolina. That was a big deal. But it's been more consistent pitching has been the difference for them. Tommy Vale and Christian Herbert Holtz have kind of solidified things on the mound. They still haven't had a guy go 7, 8, go deep into games. But we talked about earlier in the year, if they could get 15 innings out of starters, they would have been a huge bonus for them, and that's what they got last weekend. Against LSU, they got some guys that went a little deeper in games and just take so much pressure off your bullpen, and so that's helped out a lot. And then guys like Drew Nelson, Hayden Murphy, Zach Crotchfield, 3 true freshmen, stepped up and had pretty solid outings. Getting Chase Isbell back. Now you got John Armstrong and Tanner Bauman, and obviously Will Cannon there as a closer role. So you start thinking about the numbers of guys there, and all of a sudden you start going 7, 8 deep in the bullpen, and it helps you to get through a weekend series in much better shape. So that's been the thing for them is kind of doing that, and they've just been able to be consistent on the mound, throw strikes, and let their defense work, and that's what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and then talked about it little bit there in the open, but the Auburn softball gets a win here on Thursday in their first game in the SEC tournament. Come from behind win for them over Ole Miss, where Matt, if anyone missed the end of that game, Maddie Pinto was about as clutch as you can get down the stretch there, and continuing, of course, what's been an incredible season for her. Likely going to win SEC Pitcher of the Year. I believe they match up with South Carolina on Friday.
Yep, South Carolina just beat Georgia, an upset 10 over the 2 seed. Donnie Goborn's a pitcher from South Carolina. She's been really good. Auburn will probably see her again. She's pitched each of the first 2 days in the SEC tournament. Auburn wins despite playing probably one of their poor games of the year. It was definitely, one of the poor outings for Maddie Pinta. She actually got pulled and went back in the game late and had to battle down the stretch. So I think Auburn survived one today, and so that was the name of the game for them. That's it, postseason, survive and advance. So they in the semifinals tomorrow. I think at 2:00. I think is what the schedule time is right now.
Well, we'll kind of go in reverse here from what I was originally thinking we would do. You guys were on the road this week, catching up with a bunch of different Auburn targets, big Auburn targets. And, of course, the transfer portal continues to be a big thing of news for Auburn. But we'll kind of go in reverse, though. We'll start with the transfer portal from the football side. And the reason I say that is because we're getting a lot of comments here in the comment section on YouTube. So I wanted to start rolling through those. Christian, some receiver questions here. To start, that's a good place to start because, as Hugh Freeze told me told us in Birmingham when I asked him about it this week at the Regions fundraiser event, he said 1 to 2 more receivers, 1, maybe 2, I guess if they get a couple guys they like. Of course, they have plenty of scholarship spots for it right now. But the first question we had was from Will Doig, whatever. What is the depth chart? What is the Will? What does the depth chart look like at receiver if Auburn lands Shorter and Craig from Colorado? I believe those are their top 2 targets right now at the moment at receiver, Christian, if I'm not mistaken. And tell me how they're feeling with both those guys.
Yeah, it's kind of the 2 most realistic targets, I guess you could say, because both of them have been offered by Auburn and both of them have been on campus already. Jair Shorter was on campus this past weekend. I talked to him over the phone actually while we were down on our recruiting road trip in Mobile. And that's it's one of those stories where it reads pretty well. You can tell the interest, but if you sit there and you actually talk to him and you get to hear him, you can really tell what the interest is. And kind of, I would ask him about, other visits or another school that's interested and be like, yeah, they're good, but I really like Auburn. And so he's supposed to visit Colorado this next week and then probably have a decision shortly after that. But I get the sense that if Auburn is fully interested and willing to take him, he's had some injury issues there at North Texas, 2 different injuries that derailed 2 of his seasons there. But last year when he was fully healthy, honorable mention for All Conference USA, literally the best deep threat in all of college football. If you're looking at yards per reception, over 27 yards per reception, I think he had 11 touchdowns on 23 total catches. So you definitely get a deep threat there. And Montana Lamonius Craig actually graduated from Colorado today on Thursday, and he had visited Auburn. I guess it was 2 weekends ago now, and Auburn sits in a pretty good spot there. So Hugh Freeze saying, that they're willing to take 2 more receivers is pretty notable because you already landed Caleb Burton. And so you were wondering, do they want to take 2 receivers or do they want to take 3 receivers? Seems like they're willing to take 3, and these 2 make the most sense. As for Will's question, the depth chart, honestly, I really wouldn't have the first clue as to how things shake out. Caleb Burton, you would kind of slot him there at the slot position with Javarius Johnson, Jay Fair. I feel like there's another name I'm forgetting there as well. But you'd put him there at slot probably, and then the other 2 guys on the outside. But as for how the depth chart shakes out, I mean, that would all be fall practice. None of these guys are going to be guaranteed a starting spot necessarily. And you have the guy, you have guys like Camden Brown, stuff like that, still returning from Auburn as well. But it's important pickups. It's necessary pickups for Auburn at receiver. And Jason, it seems like Auburn is in a pretty good spot to land 2 more and kind of complete the receiver room now.
Yeah, I think at least 1 more when you look at it. I think you can see 1 more of these guys. And to me, this just kind of reinforces what we've heard in the spring and what, Hugh Freeze talked about some in the spring is that the inconsistency at the wide receiver group for them. I think that had a lot to do with some of the inconsistencies at quarterback too, and vice versa. But I think you look at it, and as busy as they've been and as active as they've been in the wide receiver room, you definitely can tell that they're trying to go out there and create more competition and try to upgrade those spots. And like you said, there's nothing given. And so, this is much like quarterback. I mean, there's going to be a battle in August, and there's going to be a battle for playing time in August. The one guy I would say more than any other that I expect to be on the field a good bit is Javarius Johnson. I think he's the guy that's probably been the most consistent of those guys. Camden Brown, when healthy, was probably the other guy that was the most consistent guy in the spring. Those are two guys I would probably feel most sure about being in the mix, when they get on the field in August, especially even if they had two or three guys.
Question here from Barlow Malone. He just asked, Keon Coleman, ? Of course, that's the Michigan State receiver who entered the portal when Peyton Thorne did. Yeah, obviously y'all know this better than I do, but a little bit of back and forth there. He did not end up visiting Auburn, though, and I think Florida State is looking like a pretty big lean for him.
Yeah, he's actually been at Ole Miss the last couple of days. We talked about it last week. People started asking about it. We said, look, we're here, and he's not planning on visiting. We reiterated those notes, I think, on Saturday as well. Christian talking about that. There was not a visit planned. He went to Ole Miss. Could he still visit Auburn? Yeah. I mean, I guess it's still a possibility, but I don't believe there's been a whole lot of contact back and forth between him and Keon Coleman. Would that be a guy that Auburn would like to try to get on campus? Absolutely. I think they would, but I just don't think it's happened to this point.
No, I think your most realistic options are get Jair Shorter, get Montana Lamonius Craig, pair those guys with Caleb Burton, and call it a day.
Yeah.
In all honesty.
Yeah. And like you guys talked about, as you're sort of filling out the depth chart at receiver here, those certainly aren't bad pickups. Freeze was talking about Caleb Burton, sort of saying, he's kind of a retroactive freshman because he didn't do anything at Ohio State. He kind of dealt with some injuries, didn't see the field as a freshman. But anybody that you can take in that Ohio State receiver room, anybody that they think is a player that they should sign, it's probably a pretty talented player. And Burton was already a talented player. He's already somebody that was a top 100 overall player at the high school level. Didn't participate in spring practices due to injuries, but yeah, like you're talking about, Christian, he's sort of an interesting case. Like you look at him of his size, thinking he might be a slot guy. Going back and looking at him in high school, he is very fluid, kind of moving down the field on the outside. Plays a little bit bigger than he is, and so I think you might see him at a couple different positions. But that's why, like you said, it's difficult at this point to kind of pigeonhole these guys into different positions until we see them on the field.
Yeah.
In practice. So.
Before we move on, I want to answer two questions. Actually, both of them are from Zach. He said Shorter being known for injuries worries him a little bit. Here's the thing about that. It's a one-year guy. You're bringing him in for 1 year. It's not like you're pigeonholing yourself with a scholarship for the future there. So I don't think that's necessarily a huge deal. And if he checks out the medical boxes, which I'm sure they checked that out during his visit, then you're probably okay. And then he also said Montana Lamonius Craig not committed yet. It's surprising to me. I don't think it's all that surprising. Like I said, he graduated officially from Colorado today on Thursday. He has 2 years of eligibility left. Kind of could be a similar situation to Peyton Thorne, who graduated from Michigan State and then committed to Auburn. A few hours later, Lamonius Craig could be committing within the next few days, whatever. It seems like Auburn's in a good spot with him right now, though. And so I think he probably just wanted to wait until he actually graduated at Colorado. So that was just one to get those out of the way real quick.
Yeah, I think you see that happen a lot. Guys wanting to, even guys who have decisions to make elsewhere, like talking about basketball, like Alan Flanagan. It was pretty well known that he was going to move on from this team for the better part of the last 2 months. But what does he do? He waits till you wait till you get the degree in hand, walk across the stage, and then be like, okay, now it's sort of sensible to sort of say, well, here's my next destination. Here's what I'm maybe doing with my career. And so another question here: do you think we get Isaac Ukwu? Of course, it was 2 weeks ago now. The James Madison pass rusher visited Auburn. Christian seems like maybe speaking of Ole Miss might be in play for him as well. Hugh Freeze mentioned again when he was sort of going through the list of, hey, here's the guys we're still looking at. He mentioned one or two receivers, mentioned getting, he said a defensive end, but defensive end, outside linebacker, pass rusher type guy. Said maybe they'd still be in play for a DB, and then maybe they'd still be in play for a linebacker. So they're still looking for somebody like Ukwu, and it seems like he maybe is at the top of the board for them right now.
Yeah, Jason, do you want to take this one?
I think it's a possibility. The thing about him is that I think he's probably more of a classic defensive end than maybe a true speed edge rusher, and so that might be a little bit different scenario. Now he's got experience, and he would be a physical guy. But you look at him, and I mean, this is a grown man at probably 255, 260, I would imagine, but not real tall, and so he's built more like probably a classic true defensive end type. So I think if they're looking, here's the thing about it right now, from my perspective, from a transfer portal, if you're Auburn, if you get a guy like that and he's a 1-year guy and you've got room on a roster, then it's a no-brainer. You take guys like that, because this is almost like picking in the 5th round of the NFL draft, where you're going, look, I'm taking the best available player. The best available player that can help my roster, I'm going to take that guy. And that's where Auburn is right now, where you're going, look, you feel good. You got some spots. And obviously, if your number one offensive tackle is still on the board, you go get that guy. But if not, hey, who's the best player we can go get? Let's go find that guy and go get him. And so I think that's what you're looking at for Auburn right now. So, yeah, I probably don't write off pretty much anybody that's on the board right now. I think you try to go out and try to continue to update the roster and make it as strong as possible.
I'm going to make an executive decision here and skip around some questions. So we'll come back to you here in the chat. But the next one was from Alex, who asks, how are we looking at linebacker for the fall? Christian, I wanted to give you this opportunity to segue into somebody that you reported is on campus today, a linebacker target for them that they have been targeting for the past couple of weeks, but now getting him on campus.
Yeah, Larry Nixon III out of North Texas. So another North Texas guy, teammates with Jair Shorter. I think he was North Texas's second leading tackler last year, maybe the leading tackler, something like that. Pretty productive player over his career. 1-year guy as a graduate transfer, really kind of plug-and-play guy, similar to Jair Shorter. You bring him in for a little bit of help for 1 year, help shore up that room a little bit. I say lost in quotations. There were some guys that left the room at linebacker, kind of clearing up scholarship spots. Desmond Tisdale departed, Cameron Brown departed, Powell Gordon ended up departing. And so I don't want to say you weren't thin by any means, but you maybe wanted to add one more guy. And Larry Nixon is a guy that can come in for 1 year and help. You can pair him with Austin Keys. You brought in Demario Tolan as a younger guy to help kind of rotate in and help him grow a little bit and kind of be the future of that room. And Austin Keys only has 2 years left. So a little bit of an older guy. He visited Miami last weekend. Now he's at Auburn. Not sure if he's visited anywhere else or if he plans to visit anywhere else. Hoping to catch up with him tomorrow. But this is a guy that could come in and kind of help boost that room right away just for a little bit there.
Next one here, as we can start talking a little bit about you guys' road trips. This week, where you guys got out in the state and talked to a lot of Alabama commitments, but guys that Auburn is really going after. Barlow had another question. He asked word on Kevin Riley, of course, the running back from he's from Tuscaloosa County,
yep.
Correct? Yep. Yeah. What's the latest on him, Jason, and where he stands in terms of Auburn's running back board right now?
Yeah, I mean, Christian can correct me if I'm wrong, but he's a guy that they're still trying to get on campus and visit this summer. He was in Auburn for the 8A game. He's a guy that I think is intrigued by Auburn. Obviously going to be a different type of guy. So you already have Jamarian Burnett committed in this class. He's a big physical guy. Kevin Riley's a home run hitter type running back. And so I think for Auburn, can you get him back on campus? Official visit June kind of thing. That's kind of the thing you start to point to now is you start going, a lot of these guys are going to be December. They're going to try to get decisions made early because they're going to be enrolled and being, in classes somewhere in January. You start pointing to players that take these June official visits, and he'll be one of the guys that we'll see if he starts to knock some of those things out here moving forward.
Zach says here, this gives us an opportunity to segue into another Alabama guy. Says Ryan Williams sounds more and more like an Auburn lean. Christian, tell me a little bit about y'all's conversation with him this week. Of course, a 5-star receiver committed to Alabama.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far. I wouldn't say he's an Auburn lean because he's still committed to Alabama. But this new staff has definitely they've actually given him something to think about, because when he committed to Alabama last October, I think it was, he said, look, Auburn wasn't even really in the picture. And this is the school that his dad went to. He visited for the Penn State game. He came out and said on the record, like, look, I did not enjoy it. Jason literally talked to him more at that game than anyone on staff did. And he ended up leaving early, and it was just not a good experience. Didn't have an offer going into the game. They didn't even offer him until afterwards. He's one of the best players in the country. He already was at that point. Now he's the number 3 player. And so kind of unfortunately for this new staff, they've had to play catch up. And that's been the case in a lot of recruitments, definitely with Ryan Williams. And this is one of, when you look at the 2025 class, this is like the guy. This is Auburn's, this is a can't miss guy for a lot of teams. We talked to him and he said, still committed to Alabama, but he wants to check out Auburn again this summer, wants to go see Georgia, wants to go see USC, wants to go see Ohio State. Today alone, he picked up 3 new offers from Kentucky, Oregon, and Florida. This is going to be the ultimate heavyweight battle, and it'll be that way all the way until the end. But Marcus Davis and Hugh Freeze have absolutely at least given him something to think about. And Jason, we kind of talked about it afterwards and after talking to him. There's some other intriguing schools in there, definitely like an Ohio State, but kind of feels like this is an in-state battle. And Alabama has the upper hand with his commitment, but Auburn's going to try and battle this one until the very last second there.
Yeah, no, you look at Ron Williams, and I think the thing, if you're Auburn, that you can maybe take a little solace in is that these are, and there'll be some other guys, obviously, we're talking about when we're talking about Barry and the other guys we've seen. The thing that if you're Auburn, you go, hey, you hold a little hope is that these are guys that are surrounded by lots of Auburn people, whether it's Ryan Williams and his dad, whether it's the Mobile guys that have come through Auburn that are such strong personalities, like Antonio Coleman that still lives there, coaches at Williamson, but you guys like Deshaun Davis and Trey Williams, those are guys that are in the coaching ranks now, but all those kids in Mobile grew up knowing and watching these guys. And so I think that's a big deal for Auburn. You're just playing catch up. And so now, can you catch up enough, for Ryan Williams, unless something changes and he were to change to be a 24, which we'd heard some rumors of, but we have not heard anything like that is actually going to happen. You still got a couple of years left for him. That's the key for Auburn. I think no matter what for Auburn, it's you're probably going to go, hey, what can you show up? What can you back up on the field in terms of passing game, using the wide receivers, dynamic, all those things. You do some of those things, then I think for Auburn, you have an even better shot at a guy that you put yourself at least in the hunt for right now anyway.
Speaking of extremely highly rated receivers that are committed currently to Alabama, you guys also went and saw Perry Thompson, whom Alex asked about here. He says, how are we feeling about Perry Thompson? Christian, I'll give you the floor there to move on to the next guy. And after this, there'll be another Alabama commitment to talk about. But it seems like he's a guy that Auburn feels like they're making good progress with at the moment. And like you said, it's probably going to be the same situation. They're going to be really hard on him throughout his recruiting process.
Yeah, Alex, that's a good question. And this is not the answer you're looking for, but I truly don't know. I really don't have a feel on Perry Thompson. I think Auburn has absolutely given him something to think about. But the problem is, in my mind, I think Auburn's also, and we'll talk about him in a second, I think Auburn's also given Sterling Dixon a lot to think about as well. And I don't know if Auburn can pull off 2 flips from Alabama. I think that'd be asking quite a bit in year 1. But I do think they can pull off 1. I just don't know which one it'll be, to be honest. But the thing about Perry Thompson, and Jason and I talked about it a little bit, is he just keeps coming back. He gets offered by the new staff in January, which he wasn't even offered by the previous staff, and he's a 5-star wide receiver. I think he's the number 14 player in the country. And so he gets offered. He visits a few days later. He comes up for a couple of spring practices, comes back up for A-Day, and then Jason, he has his official visit locked in for June. So that could be a big visit that weekend, because he's supposed to visit Alabama 2 weeks beforehand. Maybe you can catch some lightning in a bottle that weekend. Or maybe this goes all the way until signing day. Either way, it'll go all the way until signing day. But I just don't really have a good feel. He's committed to Alabama, so you'd lean Alabama, but a lot of signs are pointing like this is getting interesting for Auburn.
Yeah, no, the thing that you just don't, like I said, you just don't know. I feel good that Auburn has has done all they can do to this point. That's the thing. I don't think you could have asked anything more of Hugh Freeze and this staff to get to where they are right now. Now, can you get across the finish line? Some of that will be determined by what you look like on the field. Some of that will be determined by, getting guys back on campus and maybe the official visit in June where guys go, okay, I felt it, but now this is exactly what I thought it was. And those things could happen that way. But it might be, hey, I want to see what you look like when you play Georgia in the middle of the year. What's that offense going to look like? Sterling Dixon, how are you using the linebackers? The guy that you just brought in, your 1 year transfer outside guy that can also play the true linebacker spot. How's that guy using the defense? I think some of those things may be part of it, but there also may be, you may be close enough to where a guy just says, hey, you know what? That's where I want to be. And it could happen. I mean, never say never, because I've learned that in the recruiting game over the years. You never know what it's going to be for somebody. And for these kids, the thing you have to do is go get them back on campus and you have yourself a shot. Auburn's done that, like Christian mentioned, time and time again. These guys have continued to make visits. That's the first step and the biggest step to staying in the game and maybe making one of those flips down the road.
Yeah, Perry Thompson from Foley, and then Ryan Williams from Saraland 2024 and 2025 guys, respectively. We won't drone on him that much because, like you guys said, it's you're sort of in a wait and see situation with a lot of these guys. But we mentioned Sterling Dixon from Mobile Christian. That's somebody that you guys have seen a couple times recently. Tell me a little bit about Christian. Tell me a little bit about what Auburn's defensive staff is telling him right now and some of the things he was talking to you guys about.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was, it was the money quote. Jason was interviewing him, and I was just kind of sitting there listening, and I laughed a little bit, and eyes got kind of wide. He said, this Hugh Freeze has laid out the red carpet. It's been great, and he said this is a lot better staff. And it's like, okay, well, there's your lead, there's your headline. That's the money quote right there, and that's the biggest thing. So, look, this staff has made it clear this is an interesting guy who initially was looked at as kind of an edge guy. Now every team has kind of shifted in and looked at him as more of a true linebacker now. And so Josh Aldridge just kind of zeroed in on him and said, hey, you're kind of one of our guys. You're pretty much at the top of our board there at linebacker. And they really, really want him. And, he's continued to say he's locked in with Alabama, but Auburn and LSU, for that matter, are making it pretty hard on Alabama.
Yeah, I'll say this about Sterling Dixon. He's the guy in this class that is most like Keldrick Falk was in the last class. I kept saying over and over again, I just always thought Keldrick Falk was going to wind up at Auburn, and he did. I've always felt like Sterling Dixon was going to wind up at Auburn, and I like I said, Auburn's right there. They put themselves in the hunt. This is a guy that if this staff had been on board for a year, I feel pretty sure that he would be committed to Auburn right now. I think it opened the door for Alabama. He found something he liked, and now can he figure out, okay, maybe Hart versus, I don't know. There's going to be a tug of war for Sterling Dixon, but I've been in that camp for a while that I thought this is a guy that was eventually going to wind up at Auburn. We'll see if it happens, but you think the connections. Robert Woodyard is his cousin. Cam Riley's the guy that he played against and known for a long time. There's a lot of people he can bounce things off of going, hey, what's it like? Where would I fit? Hey, well, let's play beside. Could you imagine being able to play beside your cousin on the same defense in college? That would be a possibility with him and Robert Woodyard, maybe down the road at Auburn. So there's lots of things that I think Auburn has played right. And again, the staff has done a good job of giving the Tigers a shot anyway.
This question here will go back. Like I said, I'm going to bounce around a little bit. This gives us a chance to talk about their newest transfer edition while also looking at some recruiting. Storylines. Will said the offensive line has improved via the portal, but what's the status on some of the high school guys recruiting? Auburn fans, they always want to know about the offensive line when it comes to recruiting. That'll never change. But yeah, of course, referencing there that they've continued to improve the O-line. We can talk about Jaden Muskrat for a minute. So it's interesting. So Phillip Montgomery, he's the head coach at Tulsa. His starting left tackle and his starting right tackle last year are now at Auburn. Of course, they picked up Dylan Wade in that first portal period. looked at him immediately and said, that's probably Auburn starting left tackle. Seems like it ended up that way during spring practice. What was interesting, Jason, when I asked Freeze about it in Birmingham, where do you see him fitting? Because he started all 12 games for Tulsa at right tackle. He said, pretty much anywhere, and that's why he was so high for us. That's why he was such a big target for us. He said he can play, tackle or on the inside. At least for me, I'm interested to know what you thought when they picked him up. And you've of course talked to him when he was on campus. At least for me, I sort of see him slotting into that right guard spot, competing there. Not saying he's going to be a starter right away, but I think maybe the competition and the depth there with a quality player like him is needed a little bit more at guard. But you never know; he could come in and also give some competition there at tackle. Certainly, nothing is set in stone for guys like Dylan Wade or Gunnar Britton right now.
Yeah, I think I guess I talked to him when me and Christian were sitting in the parking lot of the hotel after we'd been to Foley High School the other day, and got him on the phone before he made his announcement, and he said, it was Auburn, so we kind of had some things prepared for when we got done with Jaden, but I think he's a guard. That's what he said. He said a guard first, but he could. Here's the thing about him. I think he's a guy that's first at guard, but probably slides out to right tackle if anything were to happen to Gunnar Britton. But heck, he can jump in that competition pretty quickly if they feel like, hey, we want to take a look and see what that looks like. The thing he's going to have a big advantage in is that the scheme. It's going to be a very similar scheme, obviously, with Philip Montgomery. It's going to be an easier transition. He's got one of his best friends when he came on a visit. I ran into those guys at a baseball game, and he's hanging out with Dylan Wade. And the funny thing is that he also has connections. If people didn't read my story, he also has connections on the Auburn baseball team. He played ball, I think, for 5 or 6 years with both Cooper McMurray and Caden Green, who both first-year baseball players at Auburn. So there's connections for him all over the place. So there's 4 or 5 people that he's close to that were Auburn. That was huge. That was, in the end, that was the deal for him. But, yeah, this is a guy that's versatile, and I think probably his ability to play tackle if needed may be one of the more important pickups for this team, because they just don't have a lot of depth at those tackle spots. They brought in 2 starters. You lose Colby Smith, who they moved inside the guard. You got Garner Langlow out there. There are not a whole lot of other guys at offensive tackle, so he gives you the ability to slide outside and shore up a position if needed because of injuries. And that offensive line depth is that's one of the most important things you can have going to a season in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, theoretically, I think now you have a couple backup tackles, like you said, if something were to happen to either tackle spots. I think maybe Too Tall Miller could be your emergency guy there at left tackle. Of course, we'll see what happens. But then you get an experienced player like Muskrat to come in there on the right side. He's a converted defensive tackle out of high school, or at least according to his 24/7 profile. He's a 2-star defensive lineman out of Arkansas. And then by the time he was sort of putting it together and put some injuries behind him at Tulsa, he started for the entire season. So we'll get to a couple more here, and then we'll close things up with football. I thought this is a good question here to think about these summer enrollees that are getting set to come on campus here pretty soon. Of the freshmen coming in, who do y'all think will get on the field? Of course, that's Jeremiah Cobb, Darren Reed, Hank Brown, the quarterback. Others, I go back to somebody that Jason talked about earlier. I don't see any way that Keldrick Falk does not make a decently sizable impact this season. But look, Darren Reed is somebody that I think is going to come in here. That's somebody I know you liked a lot. Christian, there along the defensive line, they might need some bodies on the D line here at some point. He's a 4-star guy. He's one of these guys I think that maybe people could say, when he comes in the summer, oh yeah, forgot he was part of this class. He's a pretty good player. But I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on this question.
Yeah, are we doing just the summer enrollees?
I don't know. I picked.
Okay. I think that's what it sounds like anyway.
Okay. So yeah,
a little bit. That's fine.
I would definitely go Reed. You want to talk about a guy that people might have forgotten, and I fall in that trap. I forget about him all the time. The JUCO defensive tackle, Quantrell Jamison Travis.
That's my guy. That's where I was going as well.
Okay. Yep. But that's absolutely a guy I think will get on the field, and he slipped the cracks because he never actually visited Auburn and just announced out of the blue that he was committed. So everyone was like, didn't know a whole lot about him. But JUCO guy there where Auburn needs kind of some more bodies along the defensive tackle. Outside of that, I don't want to take up all the answers, but Yeah, you've got a lot more safeties coming in. That's for sure. You have 3 more guys at safety, and Terrence Love, Sylvester Smith, and C.J. Johnson. Although Terrence Love could get a look down there at linebacker as well. So you've got some interesting guys coming in. You have more DBs coming in too. Tyler Scott, Colton Hood. I'll list off kind of most of the names, and then you guys can pick some as well. Quavo Sori has a chance to maybe get on the field there at receiver since they need some help. Same could theoretically be said for J.C. Hart, who signed as a defensive back and is expected to start his career at receiver. He's got great speed and great length. Maybe you use him as kind of a home run hitter there at receiver.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm Quintrell Jameson Travis is the first guy that comes to mind for me. Older, more physically mature guy on the defensive line. I do think, but I'm right there with the freshman group. I think Darren Reed's probably the first guy. I think when you start thinking about positions, when you think about running back, and so you got Jeremiah Cobb there, but that's as deep a position as Auburn has on the field. So that you start thinking about positions where you can make an impact because maybe there's not as much to learn or it's easier to pick up. So you think running back, I think corner, and I think defensive line. Those are the 3 spots where I think about it. Darren Reed's physically probably is able to go in there and withstand it. I think the true defensive end spot when they're thinking about playing this 3-4, you think about where you lost a guy like Jeffrey Emba. He's not as big as Jeffrey Emba was, but I mean, you talk about 275 pounds that can come in and play maybe some of that role, especially maybe on a 3rd down. So I could see that. And then corner, it probably gonna be a little bit more difficult. But if they don't add anybody from the portal, you could see one of these young guys step up and maybe jump in there and make an impact right away to get into play in rotation. Special teams do some of those things, but yeah, I think those 2 defensive linemen are probably the guys for me.
Very interested to see what happens with Terrence Love in terms of a position. I think we talked about it earlier this year, but just the mold of a Jamian Sherwood type player is just exciting because that's a cool player to see kind of float between those linebacker and safety spots. And I do think Auburn's staff is in a position where you look at a guy like Ron Roberts, who has been kind of experimental with that star spot. When you look at what he did at Baylor, really you need a guy in that position to be pretty versatile. And so is Terrence Love that kind of player? I don't know. Is he kind of a guy who floats in that outside linebacker position, but can also, drop back to safety? So be interested to see what, a couple years down the line they do with him. Yeah. Quavo Sori, your guy, Christian. I mean, I think that's probably the guy that it's August 18th and you open your phone and there's a 15-second clip from the football account on Twitter and it's somebody making a crazy catch or like hurdling someone. Maybe I'm just saying that because of that video of him hurdling somebody, but that's a guy with a lot of athleticism. I don't know how much he'll get on the field, but he'll probably bring some pop to that room pretty immediately, I would imagine.
The tough thing I think for both of those guys is really small school football.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start talking about the difference in the little thing, the route running, RPO game, all that stuff. That's going to be a big step for those guys at wide receiver. And so I think that's why you're looking for experience out of there. And that's why I think they're going that way right now. So athletically, 2 really athletically gifted guys, but may take them a little longer to kind of adjust.
So we can kind of close things out here. Now we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on basketball just a little bit, because like I said, the transfer portal does close tonight. Auburn will end up only having four transfer portal entries when it's all said and done, because you had Yohan Traore, you had Chance Westry, you had Stretch Akingbola entered the portal, and then Alan Flanagan earlier this week. That's
and also Alan Flanagan.
And also Alan Flanagan. We didn't get a chance to talk about that because that was just a couple of days ago. Not surprising. The only question there for him was whether he would transfer or turn pro. And so for him as a grad transfer now, he didn't have to abide by the portal window, but he did get in before the portal window. And then yesterday, something that kind of made everybody raise their eyebrows a little bit. The news that Julian Phillips from Tennessee is going to transfer. And so he's a guy where I don't think this is getting talked about enough. First and foremost is the NBA draft for him, because he's starting to shoot up some draft boards. If you look around, like he's an early second round type guy. When you look around a lot of places, I saw a couple places today that had him as like a top 30 overall prospect. And so, if he does end up coming back to college, and doesn't turn pro, you have to think Auburn is going to be in play, for him, as a transfer player, just because that makes too much sense. They're in need for a wing. He was a guy that Auburn was pretty set on him. Seemed like he was going to come to Auburn, and then Tennessee kind of sealed the deal at the last minute last year. And so I think, him and Tyron Lawrence from Vanderbilt, another guy whose name is still in the draft process. Those are the two guys that Auburn fans, I think, need to have their eyes on right now, because they got to get a wing, got to get a 3. You're still in need for a guy like that. And now Alan Flanagan is officially out the door.
Yeah, got to do that. I think the one question on Julian Phillips is what happens because of being after May 1st. The SEC had to get a waiver unless the SEC changes something, and how quickly would they do that? I think most of us expect that if you said, hey, we're going to do this, that would happen pretty quick, and you go, hey, the SEC, we're changing these rules. And I think the coaches are ready to do that because they know how much of an impact it could have on them down the road. But right now, he would be a guy that would be ineligible as it stands today because he didn't go into the portal till after May 1st. So that may be the first bridge you have to cross if you're Auburn and Julian Phillips is, do you feel good about that waiver process happening? I would expect that you'd probably feel pretty good about it considering everything that's going on, but it still is a question mark in this one. Another wrench in what's just a crazy process trying to fill out rosters right now for everybody involved. And, Bruce Pearl and his staff are trying to fill it up and get closer to having that roster that they want to get by summer. They can get started and get rolling.
Yeah, and Christian brought up in a conversation he and I were having this week, do you maybe are you comfortable with the argument of, oh, he was in the draft process and he's focusing that, or Tennessee's roster turned over a lot, and like, while I was focusing on the draft, here's what happened with my previous school, so that's why I entered the portal. You wonder how strong those arguments would be. Like you were saying, Jason, if you're Auburn and you end up taking somebody like this, that probably signals that you feel strongly about your chances for him to be eligible next year. But yeah, it's not over. In a couple days, Tyron Lawrence will be in the G League camp. If he gets an NBA Combine invite, we'll see what happens with him. Mitchell Holmes was a guy who emerged over the past week. He's a 2023 big guy. This guy who once 24/7 gives him some stars, he'll be like a high 3, low 4 star. He's an unrated guy. Just a few weeks ago, blew up on the AAU circuit. Still is going to come to Auburn for a visit, but he was a guy who they thought was going to be kind of a late addition to this 2023 class. And then a couple days ago, or yesterday, he reclassifies to 2024, and he's going to go play at Link Academy. So that's another guy who's off the board for you there. And then, what happens with Janai Broom? Like, never say never, but you never know what could happen in terms of him getting a combine invite. So, like Jason said, it's not over till it's over. This basketball staff is going to be working really hard over the next few weeks until this roster is completely finalized. Guess we'll call it there, guys. Jason, there's one more question here. I don't know if you want to give it. It's directed right at you. I don't know how much you want to give, how much time you want to give here. But Gibby asks, can you ask Jason about baseball recruiting? So, Jason, I'm officially asking you about baseball recruiting.
Yeah, no, they've got a really good class that they've signed. The question is always, as part of it, is how many do you get on campus? I think right now they've got 3 really highly rated guys. Colt Emerson is a middle infielder from the Midwest. Kevin McGonigal is another middle infielder from Northeast. And then Drew Tilley is a pitcher. Those are your 3 guys. I think they feel pretty good about Drew Tilley getting here from a pitching standpoint. Colt Emerson is a guy that's pushed himself up potentially into the first round. Could he fall depending on what his asking numbers are? That's always a big question. Kevin McGonigal is the same thing. Those are 2 guys that'll be like Auburn watched Ike Irish and Zach Crotchfeld for a long time last year and got him on campus. That's going to be the thing in terms of baseball. Here's what I can tell you. You look around the country, look at what LSU's done, adding Paul Skeens and some of those pieces, Tommy White. Look at Auburn's success they've had in the transfer portal the last couple of years. Obviously, Sonny DeShera 2 years ago. This year, you look at and you start thinking about, what Cooper McMurray's delivered at first base, for instance, a couple of those. I think Auburn will be very involved in the transfer portal. Auburn's baseball NIL has been pretty solid. That could be a benefit in trying to get guys a little bit of help with that 11.7 scholarship number. And so, they've recruited at a very high level. Can you get a couple of those guys on campus and mix in a couple of transfer guys? I think first and foremost, my guess would be you'll see Auburn be very, very busy in the transfer market in terms of starting pitching and maybe trying to find a true number one guy for next year. They got some young arms that have been really good, but I think if you could find another veteran guy to add to the mix, that'd be probably a big start for them, because they're going to lose some key guys. Not as many on the mound this year, but you're going to have some key position players that are going to be gone that you're going to try to maybe add another transfer guy to as well. So they've recruited very well, but in baseball, the question is how many of them can you get on campus?
Well, there you go, Gibby. There's your Auburn baseball recruiting update there at the 11th hour of the podcast. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for the questions. That was good. Appreciate everybody there who tuned into the YouTube live stream. If you guys listen to this on your podcast feed, we definitely appreciate it. If you could go leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, we would definitely appreciate that as well. The bumper music is by Beats by Mordecai. You guys can follow him on Twitter, SoundCloud, and Instagram. Until the next episode, for Christian and Jason, we will catch you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.